Podcast with your host, Jake Weaver. Engineered by Cedric Swan. Hey everybody, we're back with another episode of Midnight on Earth. I'm your host, Jake Weaver, and we're here to bring you more knowledge, more lights, and more love. Well, we have a legendary guest today. I'm so honored to have Dennis McKenna on the show. Absolutely legendary human being. His contributions to the human three-dimensional reality situation is profound, almost immeasurable. And we have him here. We're going to talk to him. But first, I need you to do something for me. Follow me on Instagram at midnight_on_earth. That is the address. If you go there, follow me. It gets these guests information out to more people. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you go to get your podcasts, click that button that connects us so you know when the next episode drops. And of course, the most important thing is to tell a friend, tell someone that you know that loves these type of podcasts, that would love to hear me have a conversation with Dennis McKenna. Those people you know very well, tell them about us, midnightonearth.com. Wow, so we have our social media shout out of the way, and I just want to read Dennis McKenna's bio, and then we're going to talk to him. This is going to be so amazing. Here we go. Dr. Dennis John McKenna is an American ethnopharmacologist, research pharmacognosist, lecturer, and author who has studied plant hallucinogens for over 40 years. He earned his master's degree in botany at the University of Hawaii and his doctorate in botanical sciences from the University of British Columbia. Since that time, he has conducted extensive ethnobotanical fieldwork in the Peruvian, Colombian, and Brazilian Amazon. Dennis is also a founding board member of the Hefter Research Institute, which is a nonprofit organization concerned with the investigation of the potential therapeutic uses of psychedelic medicines, and was a key investigator on the Ayahuasca Project, the first biomedical investigation of ayahuasca. From 2000 to 2017, he taught courses on ethnopharmacology and plants and human affairs as an adjunct assistant professor in the Center for Spirituality and Healing at the University of Minnesota. He emigrated to Canada in the spring of 2019 together with his wife Sheila, and now resides in Abbotsford. Since 2019, he's been working with colleagues to manifest a long-term dream, the Mckenna Academy of Natural Philosophy, a nonprofit organization founded in the spirit of the ancient mystery schools and dedicated to the study of plant medicines, consciousness, intelligence in nature, preservation of indigenous knowledge, and a revisioning of humanity's relationship with nature. Dr. McKenna is author or co-author of 6 books and over 50 scientific papers in peer-reviewed journals. And really briefly, I want to tell you about the Mckenna Academy of Natural Philosophy. Of course, we're going to talk about it more, but here's what they say. Our vision is an awakened world where all species thrive in symbiotic harmony. Our mission is to be a catalyst for the transformation of global consciousness through educational experiences that interweave our collective intelligence, science, and ancestral wisdom. And the Mckenna Academy provides a fully integrated curriculum, including spiritual, shamanic, exploratory, and medical use of psychedelic medicines. In this respect, the Mckenna Academy is a modern instantiation of the experiential mystery schools of antiquity, combining plant experiences with rigorous academic inquiry. And we're so glad he's here. Dennis, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Jake. Really appreciate your invitation. And, you know, I think you got the long form of my bibliography, my biography. So, you know, so we've used up 2 hours just to read that. So I'll see you later. You know?
Well, it turns out that time is flexible. That was only about 2 minutes. It's interesting.
I got to remember to send people the short version. That's a very old one, and it's all more or less accurate, but I have a couple condensed ones. But anyway, that gets it pretty well. So thank you so much for inviting me, and now that that's out of the way, let's get into it.
Exactly. Well, look, you're one of the most profound psychedelic humans on the planet currently in the third dimension. You're currently in the third dimension representing the McKenna family, and it's really profound, your impact and the mycelial information that's spread through these networks and activated people in certain ways. It's really astounding. But I want to ask you, when did these concepts of psychedelics or any kind of psychedelic drug enter your consciousness for the first time?
Well, you know, I'm an old geezer. I've been called a psychedelic elder, you know, and when they start calling you an elder, you know that you know your time on the planet's about done. But I hope to stick around for a while. I still have work to do.
Yes, you do.
Basically, during the 60s, you know, I was born in 1950, so my teenage years, my formative years, was that decade from 1960 to 1970, and it was a time of obviously cultural ferment and a lot of interest in psychedelics, the counterculture movement, and so on. My brother was 4 years older than me, so he was a big influence on all that, and he led me down the path of interest in psychedelics, but I was a willing explorer. We were both very interested back in those days in what you might call the esoteric, the weird, interesting ideas. You know, in some ways I blame my father for, I blame or credit him. You could look at it a couple ways, but my father was a very conventional person. He wanted to be seen as a conventional person. He lived through the Second World War and came back. And like a lot of guys that came back from that war, he just wanted to settle in and be a normal person, you know, house, white picket fence, that kind of thing. But in fact, he wasn't that. He was smarter than that. And he had many esoteric interests, which he never really talked to his friends about. At least I don't believe he did. And not that he was, you know, in the basement doing, you know, satanic rites or anything, but he was reading science fiction, and he turned us onto that. He was reading like Fate magazine. He would bring home Fate magazine, and you know, I don't know if you know Fate magazine. It's still going strong, but it was a publication that covered just a variety of topics. You know, UFOs, aliens, you know, crazy stuff. Just the paranormal. Just
that whole, we love here.
Yeah, that area, and including occasionally articles about psychedelics, and of course Terry and I were all over this Fate magazine, and that kind of twisted us, Jake, in the sense that it turned us toward this interest in, you know, the unknown and right. The bizarre and the esoteric and the weird and all that. And so when psychedelics sort of began to ooze into the culture, I guess is one way to put it, And at that time, there was pretty much LSD, and that's what there was. But we, we were all over it, and we were kind of primed for that by our experience with, with the esoteric and so on, and just our interest in kind of exploring the edges of the known, of what could be known, and so here we are. That was 60 years ago, really, and I'm still at it, and that hasn't really changed. I'm still interested in those things, and the McKenna Academy is kind of a way to formalize this in a certain way, or we say we're a modern mystery school, and that's what we're interested in. We're interested in exploring the mysteries. Well, what are the mysteries? Mysteries are everything. The mystery is the situation we find ourselves in, which, when you think about it, is bloody unlikely, and yet here we are. And if you pause to just think about it, things are really quite marvelous, in certain ways. I mean, there's a lot of good, there's a lot of bad, but the fact that we find ourselves, on this planet, in this backwater part of a galaxy, somewhere in this mad infinite universe, that's pretty amazing. And
it is pretty profound when you think about it. And also,
yeah,
where are we right now? It's a really good question as a person that's watched psychedelic culture and just human culture grow and blossom, but then have it all come through that filter that you have of all your experiences. What are your thoughts about where we're at right now in 2021?
Well, boy, that's hard to say. I think we're definitely at a transition point. We are at a threshold of profound change, and not of a, I guess every era, every historical era thinks that they live in the end times, and we, as a global culture, I think we really are in the end times, in the sense that there's never existed. There have been cultures that have, exceeded their sustainability. Eventually, they collapsed because they couldn't make it work, because they made a lot of stupid decisions about how to sustain themselves. Well, we're now seeing this on the global scale, and this is what's disturbing. This may really be the end times, in the sense that if we don't wake up, and if we don't make some hard decisions in the next 10 to 20 years, civilization is not going to survive, and the species may not survive. I don't worry about life on Earth surviving, although we certainly have the capability to wipe it out. But I think, Earth is very adaptive, although we're having profound influence on the biosphere. And, as a result of what they sometimes call the Anthropocene, the era in which human activity shapes, it's the next geological era. We're well into that. And as a result of that, life on Earth will persist, but it will be feeling the effects of this for potentially millions of years, because that's the scale that processes work on in the geological time frame.
But what about the divine dimension? What about these other entities that are working to help us evolve, because they see our evolution as a fixed point? We just have to get there. What do you think about that? It seems like there is the intervention happening in multiple dimensions that is kind of signaling that perhaps we are destined to achieve a heaven on earth, new earth scenario, but we all have to take action to make it happen. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, I think we have to take action to make it happen. And I think I'm a little, I'm more than a little, I'm skeptical about the entities. I think that it's up to us to save our butts, basically.
Yes.
I think, the 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 super enlightened alien space brothers are not going to show up and pull us out of the fire, and I don't think Jesus is coming either. And I think basically it's up to us. And I think the
Definitely.
entities, I mean, if there are these entities and they're going to intervene, well, where the hell are we? Are they? It's high time that they showed up and told us, how to get ourselves out of this. I don't see that happening. So we have to rely on our own intelligence and our own compassion and our own, cleverness, good ideas to get out of this. And the dismaying part, Jake, is that the more profound the problems that we're facing, the stupider we seem to be getting as a species. I mean,
I've noticed
yeah. So that's a problem.
Is that a fear response collectively pushing us in our to our reptilian brain, where we're just lower collective brain function, where fear has not allowed those higher frequencies to affect us collectively?
Right, and then that is a problem, because we need clarity. We need wisdom. I mean, we need wisdom more than anything. And there are so many forces that mitigate against that. And every time you go online, every time you look at social media, every time you watch the news, there's always somebody that's touting, if you just follow us or follow these ideas or whatever, you'll be fine. And which is what religion and some of these things have always done. It's always been a sort of temptation to the weak-minded. If you want my opinion, it's like,
that's true.
There are simple answers. All you have to do is accept this doctrine, this dogma, follow this or that person, and it's all going to be fine. And it's kind of like an invitation to stop thinking, turn off your brain, and just do it. And I'm totally against that. I think, and that's what the Academy is an invitation. The Academy is about helping people learn how to think, not telling them what to think.
Right.
And that's a big difference. And the ability to have analytical thought and clarity of thought is almost becoming a lost art, especially as the collective memosphere, if you want to call it that, or the collective intelligence, now often represented by the internet, just becomes cluttered with so much crap.
But I'm noticing, Dennis, a polarity to that being the widespread acceptance of potent psychedelics. There's a DMT industry now. There's hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars collectively being poured into different companies that are trying to analyze and understand the medical effects of 5-MeO, DMT, and other substances like ayahuasca. So is this the response to the certain aspects lowering? Is there the opening up of mainstream DMT, mainstream ayahuasca? It's so mainstream now. What do you think about all that? It's mind-blowing to me.
Well, in some ways, I'm very encouraged by that. I mean, it took us long enough as a species to wake up for this. We're not doing anything that indigenous people have not been doing for 10,000 years, and they've been sort of the stewards of these plant medicines and that psychedelic worldview. So it's good to see that it's getting recognition, and it's becoming almost acceptable. The stigma is being removed.
It's so close.
But as we try and transition into this and really establish this co-evolutionary relationship, not establish it, it's always existed, but acknowledge the co-evolutionary relationship and try to foster it and move it forward. But it's problematic because, we're monkeys and we're problematic monkeys. And there's, and it's human nature, in some ways, like if you look at the commercialization of psychedelics and all
It's
that, some
mind-blowing.
people really get it. Other people just see, a chance to cash in.
I know, dollar sign.
Typical capitalistic perspective.
What's
and
up with that?
it's human nature, and
To monetize everything, like go, ooh, there's an experience that provides an effect. Let's figure out how to charge people money for it.
Effectively, yes, and it's okay. I mean, there's got to be a monetary aspect, commercial aspect to these things, but we need to be careful, the way we perceive, because these substances are in fact, I believe, co-evolutionary catalysts, and they're sending a message to our species, whether you want to say the entities behind them, or just simply that these things unlock parts of ourselves that we don't normally have access to. But the message to our species is pretty simple, which is wake up,
Jesus.
Wake up, because you're wrecking this place, and once we wake up, then we have to wise up, and that's the hard part in terms of the decisions that we make going forward. How are we going to avert the threats that are impending, and the window is getting narrower. I mean, it used to be, we figured 30 years ago, which is not that long ago.
No.
We used to think, well, there are challenges, but we have plenty of time to figure this out. Well, now we didn't do it, and we haven't really stepped up. And now instead of 30 years, we have maybe 10 years. And that's an optimistic projection, so how are we going to move this thing forward before, and as we see, we only have to look at events of last summer, and all of these hurricanes, on one side of the country is on fire, the other side is underwater, and these things are accelerating and much faster than anybody thought. So at a certain point, you reach a threshold where there's no resiliency in the system anymore. There's no ability to recover, to restore balance, because as soon as you get done dealing with one crisis, the next one comes along,
So,
and
Dennis,
so
you're seeing this crisis. Yes, you're seeing this crisis, Dennis, but then at the same time, is consciousness or just human awareness of this other information expanding at that same accelerated rate, in the hopes that we get it, that we all wake up, and somehow these legalized psychedelics, and I mean, in Portland, where I live in Portland, Oregon, it's decriminalized. Drugs are decriminalized. You can have LSD, cocaine, DMT, and you're not even going to get a ticket at this point.
Right. Well, that's right, and that's encouraging.
Not to equate those three, because we don't want to.
But I mean, it's encouraging that that's happening. The sad part is that these things should never have been criminalized, and the very idea that you could criminalize a plant or a mushroom or any organism is just appalling, and it's a reflection of our disrespect for nature, our complete misunderstanding of our relationship with nature, and our arrogance. I mean, who delegated the human species to say that we could declare a species anathema and declare that it should be eradicated? I mean, if any species on the planet should be eradicated, it's us, and we may accomplish that yet, but in the sense that, instead of becoming part of this sort of, collective enterprise of the biosphere to try to save ourselves, we become like a virus ourselves. We become like a parasite on the planet, and
but it's not all of us. It's not everyone.
Not everyone, and that's the critical question, Jake. Are there enough people that are hearing the message from the psychedelics, from whatever place this wisdom is coming from? Are enough people getting the message fast enough to make a difference? And are the right people getting the message fast enough? Because it's not enough that schmucks like you and me get the message and our psychic, but people who have influence, not only wisdom, but ability to make real change on a global scale. And it dismays me that that's not happening. We have to be concerned, I think, as members of the psychedelic community, that we may be living in a bubble, and when you live in a bubble, you're not aware,
what's really going on in the bigger sphere,
what's really going on outside of that bubble. So you have a temptation to delusion. It's like, oh, well, we're in this bubble. But the fact is, a tiny fraction of the human species is really, aware of this. Now it is spreading, but is it spreading fast enough? And then the other aspect of this, it's not simply enough to, say, yes, I get it, and I get the message. But then what do you do with the message? We have two challenges here. We have linked challenges. One of them is to wake up, to receive that message. I think that's happening because nature is forcing us. Even the most idiot politician and apparatchiks in government and other institutions look at the changes that are happening. You have to be completely dumb not to accept the evidence in front of our eyes, which is that climate change is no longer an abstraction. This is what we're living through, and we're seeing all of these systems that formerly were self-regulating, self-equilibrating, they're falling apart, so you have to accept that change is accelerating. And then the question is, so you get the wake-up call, but then you have to not only wake up, you then have to wise up, in the sense that you have to become wise based on what you learned in terms of the changes that you make. And that's a much harder message to propagate, because it requires that we change.
Is that the spiritual component? Is that something that you need to then develop to, like you said, wise up? It's not just physical knowledge we're talking about. We're talking about esoteric knowledge and just learning about yourself and knowing yourself and knowing what that spirituality is. Is that what you're talking about, Dennis? It's just taking it up spiritually?
Well, that's a part of it. I mean, I think that's like the individual internal response that the psychedelics offer, the opportunities for people to become wise, to gain wisdom. But then how do we implement that in terms of action? I often say in my talks that we are a very clever species. We're very inventive. We develop technologies that potentially properly deployed can save the world, but improperly deployed, they can destroy the world. And we don't have the wisdom to use these technologies. Our cleverness has outpaced our wisdom, and that's the challenge that we face. How are we going to make the choices that ensure sustainability, ensure that everyone, that, like the Academy says, like its vision is, all species can live in symbiotic harmony. And it's possible. I mean, there's enough resources. There are 8 billion people on the planet, more or less. It changes. We have enough resources. If it was equitably distributed, if we
definitely
could, that everyone could live a sustainable life, not a super rich life, but not abject poverty. But you got to make some changes. I mean, you have to get rid of, predatory capitalism, which is based on consumerism and the whole old Darwinian model of survival of the fittest. And, if you win, then I have to lose. If we win, then these other people have to lose. That's not how biology works. I mean, that's an old model of evolution. Biology works based on symbiosis. Symbiosis is mutually beneficial collaborations between species. And that lifts all boats. And that's the way evolution advances, is by these symbiotic relationships. And, that's what we have to strive for. But, there are many people who don't share this perspective. And a lot of them have the financial and political power to say, well, we liked it the way it was when we controlled things. And this is, when we controlled the money and the distribution of resources and all this stuff. And we want to push back against this idea, but it's not going to work. There is no going back. People talk after the pandemic and so on about a return to normal. There is not going to happen. There is no new normal. This is the new normal, and it doesn't look like the old normal at all. And so we have to get used to this. We have to make the best of it. And it's possible to do it, but it requires, sort of collaboration, appreciation of other people's points of view, and all of these things. And you don't see that. I mean,
I would say that is genuine love. A genuine love for each other would seem.
That's a good place to start. Yes, exactly. Exactly.
We start there, we can really, everything kind of falls into place. And you're right, there is an infinite amount of resources because in a way, like Hinduism would say, everything is made out of God, right? The divine, or just this original substance. We don't know what it is, but everything's made out of it. So it can show, and it's infinite. So it can show up to satisfy our needs. But we have to raise our consciousness collectively to access those higher technologies. What do you think about that?
Right. Well, yes, I think that's exactly what you have to do. And, it has to go beyond just, turning everybody onto psychedelics, although that's a part of it, that's a part of it, but that's not sufficient. And because,
it makes sense.
They say sometimes when you go to a retreat and you have these life-changing, profound psychedelic experiences, the real work begins after that. What do you do with that insight? How do you implement it? How do you change your life? And unfortunately, it seems to require that we all have to change our relationship, not only with each other, but with the limited resources that we have on the planet. And I think we're all guilty. We're all, the very fact that we're here talking to each other, and I got my computer, you have yours, we have the internet, we have all these technologies, we have all these things. I mean, can you imagine how privileged we are compared to 90% of the world?
I thank I thank the mystery every day. I'm so grateful. Ever long gratitude for everything I'm blessed with.
Yeah, well, it's important. It's important to have gratitude. It's important to, but then how do you share? How do you bring other people on board? Because it's always been the case that, in these societies that are under great environmental and economic stress, the people that lose first, everybody loses ultimately, but the people that lose first are the people that are poor, and the people are displaced, and the people that don't have resources, and they're the most vulnerable. And the thing is, eventually we all become those people as resources get depleted and so on. So, I don't know, Jake, frankly.
Well, people say there's a psychedelic renaissance right now, much like the psychedelic renaissance of the 60s, except with the internet and things in place and the instant communication and all of these ways to use cryptocurrencies to buy certain substances. There's floods of psychedelic substances all over the world, and they're high quality, even to the point now where there's DMT in the e-cigarette vape pens. I don't know if you've seen that yet, where they and to me,
I'm not sure this is a good idea, but
I was going to ask you about that because it's so prevalent now, and these psychedelics are so powerful, and they're literally everywhere. I mean, it's if you look, you can probably get it online. I don't recommend that legally. I can't recommend that, but you know, it's all out there. What do you think about that? DMT in a vape pen, ayahuasca retreats that you can get 30% off of, like 30% off your ayahuasca experience. Like, what do you think about all that?
Well, I think that we have to be careful. I think the fact that these things are widely available doesn't mean that their use will necessarily be beneficial or constructive. For example, the DMT vape pen, good idea, but these things. I mean, you know, the technology is there to do it, and the temptation to do it on the freeway at 70 miles an hour is also there.
It takes the sacredness away. The sacredness is lost.
It takes the sacredness away. These things should be used under thoughtfully, respectfully, probably rarely, and very carefully structured environments, set and setting, right? Because the indigenous people, again, we can take a leaf from indigenous people, and that's always been the way they've been approached. They've always understood this. So the widespread availability of psychedelics, especially in these dose forms, I am not in favor of it because it encouraged thoughtless use, basically. Exactly. It encourages casual use. They should not be approached casually, you know, and just because there's lots of psychedelics available in all sorts of dosage forms and so on, you know, this is not necessarily the answer. I mean, this is something that's happened, and a lot of it has been driven by the capitalistic impulse. For example, you mentioned ayahuasca. You know, ayahuasca is a traditional medicine that potentially could help many, many people. And, you know, we've all witnessed that, we've seen that, but we have to think clearly. There's not enough ayahuasca in the world to help the world. And it's an endangered species. People love it so much that it's under a lot of pressure. And similarly with things like peyote and iboga and a lot of these natural psychedelics, the one exception being mushrooms, because mushrooms can be grown by the ton, so there's no pressure on the supply. And so what about the ethics? I mean, I myself have organized ayahuasca retreats. I did that for years, and I've seen the benefits up close that it can have for people. But now I'm wondering, is it an ethical thing to do to essentially use a traditional medicine, take it from another culture, co-opt it, commercialize it, and deplete it? That's the problem. You know, that's a big aspect of it. You know, we have to work out ways so that these species are protected, and there's adequate supplies, and there's sustainable production, and all of those things. And so, in a sense, what we do with that is it's kind of what we do with those species is kind of a microcosm of some of the challenges that we face with resources in general.
Well, when you did it though, Dennis, it seems like it came from the heart. It was a spiritual experience. You wanted to heal people. There's people that are coming at this experience strictly from a business standpoint, where, like we talked about earlier, they're seeing dollar signs. They have these ideas, they organize, they hire a shaman. or a so-called shaman, at least someone that knows how to work with these plant medicines. And they hire these people, they bring them in like a contractor to create these experiences. That's a whole different experience, I think, than something that's led by you, that comes from love and comes from the heart and spirit, versus something that's strictly coming from commercialization.
Right. Well, I'm not, I'm not putting myself up there as the person that necessarily is doing it right. I'm thinking myself about my relationship to these things. I'll tell you, Jake, what I would like to see, and I talk about this more and more. I'm gonna move my.
Oh yeah, he's in the light. For people that are just listening to this, Dennis is adjusting his camera to not be exactly in the light, but we already know he's in the light because he's a light being in a physical body. You can't hide your light, Dennis. There's no.
Apparently, not only can I not hide it, I can't hide from it. There we are. Okay, that's better.
All right.
But what I would like to see, and what I think, what is encouraging here to me, is these decrim movements that are happening on state and municipal, local levels. The decriminalization of psychedelics is the first step toward making these things available to people in a way that is sustainable, that is respectful of the traditions. And what I would like to see that, is in many of these communities, there are centers that exist, places that already offer psychedelics, but they're underground. They're technically not legal,
right?
But the decrim movement opens the possibility that they could come out of the shadows. They could start operating openly. They could work with indigenous communities to produce the medicines sustainably, naturally, and so on. And rather than taking people down to South America or whatever to find the medicine, to have the medicine, bring the medicine up to North America, set up supply chains for sustainable production of these things, and bring the medicine to the people rather than people to the medicine, and that's how you can make it work. And that's what I would like to see, is these healing centers, if you want to call them that, have got to be integrated into their communities, so that's where the social responsibility comes, that they are operating in the community, they're open, that they use psychedelics, and that might be one of a menu of healthy, therapies or healthy alternatives they offer people. People can go to these centers and have a psychedelic experience, managed, guided by an experienced facilitator, and do it that way, and the importance of the community, connection is really important. I think, like they could just say, well, we offer a range of beneficial things, maybe nutritional counseling, maybe yoga, maybe family counseling, maybe massage, all of these things that any alternative healing center would offer, and that could contribute to the mental health and resilience of the community.
It would just be normal medicine, like it should be.
It would be normal medicine, and psychedelics are a big part of that, but not the only thing.
They do have that here in Portland, Oregon, and within about a year and a half, they're going to have psychedelic mushroom trip centers, where as long as you have get this, just a high school diploma, you don't even have to be a licensed physician, you can open up a magic mushroom psychedelic trip center, where they have the legislation in place here in Portland, Oregon, after its 2-year trial phase. It's going to be pretty interesting, because you're unlocking something. You're letting the floodgates open to have for anyone to have access to that. What do you think about that? That literally anyone.
I think that's the model. I think I'm all in favor of that. I think that's as well. That's exactly what needs to happen, that kind of thing. And they, I don't know if just a high school diploma I think there should be some kind of certification.
Of course.
But just like we're not going to let people drive cars, unless they've learned how to do it. I think that there should be training and certification programs. If you want to get formal about it, certification programs, but just ways to help people learn how to use these things beneficially. And you don't have to be a physician or a psychiatrist or a therapist or in any formal sense. You just have to be a compassionate person who knows how to do it. But I think there should be some, if you want to set yourself up to offer these things, then you should have some degree of, number one, experience with them and expertise on how to do it. But what's happening in Oregon, frankly, Jake, is the most encouraging thing right now.
I know, I'm pretty excited. It's
psychedelic.
I feel awesome about that it's happening. I mean, but maybe that's something you could offer eventually at the Mckenna Academy, is some sort of Western shamanic training or some sort of leadership for these centers.
This is within our mandate, within our aspirations. I mean, when I established the academy, which was pre-COVID, the whole idea was that a lot of what we did was going to be physical conferences and retreats, in South America probably, and that's a lot of what we would do. Well, COVID really, rearranged those priorities rather quickly, so we've had to develop an online virtual presence, and that's what we've been trying to do. But we want to get back to that. We want to get back to that idea that we can have a physical place, whether it's in Oregon or South America or wherever. And then probably another factor is, what I had been doing was organizing retreats in South America, but then you have to look at the downsides of that. You require people, in the first place, only people that can afford to spend time and money to go there and have these retreats. So it markets to the wealthier people, and to go there and have these retreats, there's a carbon footprint associated with that. And so maybe these localized places are the way to go. And in the case of mushrooms, there isn't a supply issue. Every retreat center can grow their own, and that's good. That's a good thing. And I'm all for research. What's that?
Oh, I said there's definitely an abundance of mushrooms here in Oregon.
Absolutely. So I'm all for that. I think that is the way things are trending, and I'd like to see more of that. On the research, on the scientific side of it, I mean, I am a scientist. I am in favor of this drug discovery stuff, and there's a lot of people focused on that. But I honestly, a lot of this is motivated by the opportunity to co-opt these things, create intellectual property, create inventions that can be patented and so on. And that's just the way capitalists, when capitalism and science marry each other, then that's what happens.
I was just going to.
But in some ways, I'm kind of amused when people say, "Well, we'll take the psilocybin molecule, we'll make this derivative, and it will be better." But actually, psilocybin is just about the perfect psychedelic if you think about it. It's non-toxic. Most of the time, the effects are pleasant, but still profound. There's no issue with supply. There's no issue, it can be sustainably produced using organic processes, unlike synthetics, which, require a lot of chemistry and a lot of, essentially, you have to pollute the environment to produce these things. So I would like to see, more emphasis on the natural psychedelics, and that's what the places like these centers in Oregon offer that possibility.
Well, do you have a favorite type of mushroom, a favorite strain, whether it's cubensis or cyanescence? Is there some that you particularly prefer? I prefer cyanescence personally. That's just me. But what do you think?
Well, I have to be honest. I've only taken cyanescence a few times. Most of my experience has been with cubensis, and they're both fine. I mean, cubensis is the easiest to cultivate, so
Right.
that's what people
Exactly.
have their experience with. Cyanescence is more difficult, but not that difficult. I think it's just a question of what your preference is. I mean, the molecule is the same, and the differences between the species are not that great. I mean, it's not that difference, because psilocybin is psilocybin, no matter
Right.
where you find it. So
It
I
just seems
don't
to be
really
a
have
more
a
potent strain,
preference.
but you don't have a
Yeah, they are definitely more potent, and this is something to be not concerned about, but aware of. That 2 grams of cyanescence is easily equivalent to 5 grams of cubensis, and
right.
so, but that's just a matter of titrating the dose and figuring out what your medicine is. But cubensis is very easily cultivated, and that's what's out there. And then,
Yeah.
of course, there are many strains and different potencies and so on. So this is just about essentially strain development, the same kind of technology you might apply to cannabis.
Sure.
I mean, now we have seen with cannabis, what you're getting is, I mean, these things are artifacts. These things are heavily genetically modified, whether through just selective breeding. Mostly, they're not being genetically engineered.
Yeah, in Oregon,
But
of
the
course.
same thing applies to psilocybin. You can select strains and potencies and so on. And you can go even to the next step, and this is already being done, where they take the genes for psilocybin biosynthesis and transfer those into yeast
Oh
or
my God.
bacteria. And you can do that. And my question is,
Wow.
why? Why do you need to do
That's
that?
some special
The
toast.
reason they do it is because then that's proprietary and they can protect it. But it
Ooh.
seems that the mushrooms are quite capable of making it. They don't really need to be put into yeast. What's to be gained by that?
Well, like I said, there could be some very special toast or brownies that make you feel really amazing. But I want to ask you, Dennis, how do you feel about the current trend of microdosing, and then also these corporate personality types taking these psychedelic drugs in order to have corporate related epiphanies or design things for movies, things like that? The microdosing trend I'm really concerned about, because I don't think people understand how it affects the psyche. But what do you think about that?
I am skeptical about microdosing.
Okay.
I think that, I mean, it may have some benefits for some people. I think it's highly overrated. There haven't been any good studies that show that it really has an effect. In fact, the one study I'm aware of compared placebo to microdosing and showed that, yes, there was improvement, but a response to the placebo and the response to the actual medicine was about the same. And I think that in some ways microdosing is a well, it sounds, I don't know, it sounds elitist and maybe disrespectful to say it, but in a certain sense, I think microdosing is a way to be with the cool kids
Uh-huh.
and never actually look around the corner and see this world of wonder
Ah.
that it is waiting to be discovered if they had the courage to actually take a real dose, and so I'm skeptical about microdosing. It may be better maybe for maintaining if you have issues with depression and that sort of thing, might be better to microdose than to take SSRIs. So in that sense, it could be beneficial. But I think that people should be aware that, in fact, there is more to be discovered if you take a full dose. Then you can have a true epiphany.
A macro dose.
A macro dose, and actually get to the root of some of the problems that you may have with respect to depression and this sort of thing. Or, whereas the microdose, it may be sustainable, but I don't think it's going to knock you off your, back on your heels. And that's sort of the point with psychedelic experiences. They need to be, profound and transformative and impactful.
Recreational. Yeah. And that way, I think it's also making up for nutritional deficiencies where people are getting the serotonin boosts and the GABA and things, but they could also get that from eating better. And they're
exactly. I mean, that's also an overlap. I don't have any problem with people using psychedelics for creativity.
Sure.
For example, I mean, for thinking about whatever, if they're mathematicians or inventors or artists or whatever, I mean, sure, they can be used for creativity. There's nothing wrong with that. And actually, there's nothing really wrong with recreational, in the sense that, I mean, people have this idea, you shouldn't use them recreationally. Well, what do you mean they shouldn't be used recreationally? I mean, they should be used thoughtfully and respectfully. But it's okay to take them and have an enjoyable experience. Look at the word, Jake, recreation.
Right.
That's what it's all about. And you can take a strong dose and recreate yourself, or you can benefit from recreational use. Certainly, they are less harmful than, say, recreational use of alcohol, which is often not so beneficial for people.
No, not at all, actually. I think it's really morally about just making sure that even in small doses that you maintain the reverence and the understanding.
That's the thing. Reverence and respect, for the way you use these substances, and that's also respect for yourself, in a certain sense. It's because the psychedelic experience happens at the interface of the individual and the medicine. And the medicine, the psychedelic experience, is a profoundly individual thing. Nobody can have your psychedelic experience for you. And that's the challenge. You have to have the courage to take it on and have it yourself. You can't say, you can't delegate these things, any more than you can delegate other types of human activity that you just can't substitute. You can't delegate people to have sex for you. You can't delegate people to, die for you. You can't delegate people to be born for you. These are things that an individual just has to do, and the psychedelic experience is like that. It's something that happens at the interface of the medicine and the individual. But that said, the resonance of that works beyond that, because then it affects the person and the way they relate to their community, their friends, their society, their jobs, all of these things. So the effects of these individual experiences resonate far beyond the individual, and actually makes us better, wiser people. Isn't that what they're supposed to do?
I think so. I think there's a frequency shift, a true electromagnetic frequency shift, and then you're broadcasting a different frequency to the collective, which then influences that collective frequency. And if enough of us do that, maybe we can turn the tide. I think we can save the planet. I think it's interesting, when I interviewed Ken Babbs, he was saying the exact same things that you are about the planet and how we should be concerned about that. It's really interesting that you both brought that up. And I think we can, just like I told him, I think we can turn the tide if enough of us really wake up and spread the message. And I think that that's happening. I don't think personally, intuitively, and please tell me what you think, I don't think it's our destiny as humans to fade into the dust. I don't think it's our destiny as humans to build this ladder to nowhere, this staircase to nothingness. I think it's our destiny as humans to be emissaries of love and light throughout the universe, to adapt all the things that we learned in our symbiotic relationship with the earth to the rest of the universe. Share that knowledge. What do you think about that, Dennis?
Well, of course, I agree with that. I mean, and I hope that's true. That's the thing. I hope that's true. That's a very positive attitude, and I hope it's true, because you're absolutely right on the money. But you look around and you wonder, right now that doesn't seem to be happening. That doesn't mean we shouldn't keep trying, but that's the that's the issue. I would like to believe that it's exactly that these things are waking us up so that we can become enlightened and we can move this project forward and maybe eventually reach our destiny, which is probably, if we have a destiny. I mean, I don't know, but to bring this to the universe itself, I mean, as an old science fiction fan, I say our destiny lies in the stars, But the problem is, Jake, that the
the worst of us are terrible. I get it.
I mean, one of the conundrums that we see, one of the puzzles that we find, when we look out into the galaxy and beyond that, and we can calculate how many planets there probably are, and how many of those might support life, and how many of those might support technological civilizations, and
Drake's equation,
and you can make a reasonable guess, and that's all it is, on how abundant technological civilizations probably are. The question is, where are they? This is something that concerns, this is the so-called, the Fermi paradox, when Fermi said, well, if these alien civilizations are around and certain percentage have reached a certain level of technological advancement and so on, how come they're not already here?
But what if they are here, but they're at a different level of density, and because of their high frequency nature, they can't get into the third dimension because we think we're so high, but we're actually really low. What do you think?
That's a possibility, but then the question, the temptation then is to say, science, if you want to, I'm not saying that science is the necessarily ultimate way to know things, but if you want to look at it as a scientist, science can't speak to that, because there's no way to measure that, there's no way to verify that. So then you're saying, well, maybe this is true, but there's no way to say that that's not just a complete delusion. And we have to be very careful about delusions in this space, true. Because we're very, very tempted. I mean, it may be that, maybe part of the answer to this conundrum of the Fermi paradox is that, the galaxy has spawned hundreds of thousands of technological civilizations, in the last 13 billion years or whatever, and they've all reached a certain point of development, and then they've destroyed themselves. And this may be what we're doing, so that, yes, if we ever got out there, we'd find the ruins of all these, civilizations that made the same mistakes we did and disappeared.
Well, the Hopi,
depressing as that is, that may be why we don't find them.
Yeah, well, the Hopi, the Native American tribe, the Hopi, who have the longest oral tradition of any Native American tribe, they sent a representative out around 2008 or 9, I believe, and said that we have passed the point where previous situations we blew ourselves up. They say potentially 4 times, or the Aztecs say 5. But those times where we blew ourselves up and had to start over, the Hopi said we have passed the point of that destruction, and we are now at an uncharted new place. They called it the one heart path or the single heart path, and we're going somewhere that we've never gone before, but we made it. That's what the Hopi think.
Well, I think there's something to that. That's right. We have gone further than, and we've dodged the bullet so far. And so maybe built into it somewhere, there is some kind of destiny that we don't even know what it is, that we're fulfilling. We're on this path. We'd like to think so. We would like to think so, but like I say, comforting delusions are not going to get us there. But maybe it's not a delusion. I don't know. This is where I think qualities like humility come in, and acknowledging. This is one of the big lessons I get from psychedelics, and many people get from psychedelics, is we need to remember how little we know. Exactly. Science can be very arrogant about what it thinks it knows, but it understands a very small segment of reality. And so we should remember that there's an infinitely greater amount of stuff that we don't know that could change the equation. So we can be proud of science, but we shouldn't be overly proud of it, because we only, science is very good at looking at tiny slices of reality, right. But not the big picture. It's not so good when it comes to the big picture. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting that science does that. It does have a place. Like, we wouldn't be here without science. I wouldn't, like we talked about earlier, we wouldn't be talking in Hawaii and Oregon in real time like this without science. It's done so much for us, and it's come from inspiration. And some people would say that inspiration is divine, so you could then extrapolate that science is a divine art in its own way. But it all comes through human perceptions, human understandings, which we have to understand collectively are limited. And it's growing. We're getting new information, more information, but it's always going to be limited. And we can't think that science is the be-all, end-all. It's not a cult. It's just a method of understanding the reality in the world around us, and multiple realities, actually.
Yeah, that's right. It's not at least when it's properly practiced, it's not a cult. And it is a way. Here's what makes science different than other things like religion and so on, because religions pretty much have a static dogma. They have a set of beliefs and they are not questioned. And what science does, if it's properly pursued, it's the job of science to always question itself. It has this, yes. If it's properly practiced, it has this self-checking mechanism built into it, where we try to understand reality, we try to understand the cosmos, we build theories, we build hypotheses, and then we check those against the data that we have. And the idea is, does the hypothesis fit the data that we have? And you can say, well, yeah, based on so far, knowing that we have limited data, this hypothesis, whatever it may be, relativity, for example, or, has explanatory value. But you always have to keep in mind that you never prove anything with science. You can't prove anything. You can only not disprove things, right. And what you think is this understanding about a process or something may be overturned next week or next year or 500 years from now by new data. And if you look at the history of physics, this is exactly what's happened. Newtonian physics served us well, and Newtonian physics is quite useful on the macro scale. But we now understand that it's sorely lacking in certain explanatory in certain explanatory aspects. So science it's the only human institution I know of where you construct suppositions, which is another way to say hypotheses or constructions about how things are. And then if you're doing your job right, you try like hell to demolish them.
Yes.
You know,
I don't
that's the
think
whole
people
point.
get that. I don't think people get that. They think
People
science
do
is
not
concrete.
get it.
Okay,
Even
thank
a
you.
lot of scientists don't get this, you know. That's the thing. I am a person who believes, I think many scientists don't think about this. Even though they're practicing science, they never really think about what they're really doing. You know, they master the technology, they become very good technicians of manipulating data and constructing models and that sort of thing. But do they ever pause to think about, why are we doing this? What is the real reason we're doing this? Well, the real reason for doing it is we're engaged in a search for truth. You know, that's the ultimate, you know, objective of science, is to uncover truth. Knowing that we're uncovering pieces of the truth. You know, you're never going to reach a point where you say, oh, we have all this figured out. We have this whole thing figured out. We don't have to worry anymore. We have this nailed down. And I'm always amused by, you know, every few years there's a book that comes out that talks about something titled something like "The End of Science," you know, saying, you
this
know,
new thing blows it all
we
away.
have it all figured out. And about the time the book comes out, then some discovery is made that completely blows it up. So we've got to remember to keep an open mind, you know, and to acknowledge how little we know, you know, the limitations of our knowledge.
We often think as humans, no matter what time period we're in, we think that we're at the pinnacle of knowledge, the pinnacle of understanding. And in a sense, we could say like, oh, knowledge, we got this. We have knowledge. You could say 1500s, 1700s. They thought they knew everything. 1800s. But yet somehow we're in 2021 and we can't acknowledge collectively. We can, but we can't acknowledge collectively that we don't really know anything in our science.
Right. I mean, the thing is,
state of evolution.
Every era, every historical era fancies that it is at the pinnacle of knowledge.
Exactly.
And in fact, it is at the pinnacle of knowledge for that time. You know, but you know, so there, it's not that there is, you know, you're climbing a mountain and eventually you reach the top. It's more like you're climbing a mountain, but it's like a staircase. There are certain levels, and each level, it's like, you know, you think you reach it and you think, oh, well, you know, now we have this vast understanding. And then new information comes along and shows that, you know, your models are not complete. There's a whole lot you're not taking into account here. So I think that this is the challenge of science. This is the beauty of science in a certain way, you know, because, you know, you never do reach a point where you say we don't need this anymore, which is good for scientists, because, you know, that's like an employment program for scientists. You know,
it's like, woohoo!
You'll always have a job.
Well, if they integrate the psychedelic experience into the mainstream, they make it normal, these scientists will have these psychedelic experiences and understand that, yes, they're at the pinnacle of knowledge, but there is an arching plateau that can never really be reached. It's just always there, always moving forward until I guess we're non-physical beings. But Dennis, I do want to ask you a few questions. We did have some questions submitted by listeners who were very excited that you were going to be on the show, and they wanted to ask you a couple specific questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay. Well,
we'll see.
This one,
ask the questions.
This one is from Travis, and he says, do you see a difference in tryptamines versus phenylethylamines? He feels that 2CB, MDMA, and MDA are good fun, but not deeply psychedelic, and wanted to know your thoughts.
I don't think you can make a blanket statement like that. I mean, I think something like mescaline, for example, can be deeply psychedelic. The thing is, the psychedelics, you know, what I call the true psychedelics is a way to classify them. They all hit this certain subtype of serotonin receptors, you know, the so-called serotonin 2A receptors, and they all interact with that. And in my as a pharmacologist, I say that by definition, psychedelics have to be serotonin 2A agonists. But then the differences in structure, the different ways that, you know, that they're absorbed and excreted and so on, other factors make for the difference in the activity, you know, apparent activity. That said, I do think, I don't think you can say the phenethylamines are, you know, less profound. I think, again, the variables are so many complex, you know, because there are so many external variables, set and setting, all of these things. You can have profound experiences on phenethylamines. The tryptamines just seem to lend themselves more easily, at least in my experience, to those types of experiences. I sometimes talk about, you know, the tryptamine dimension in a certain way. And I don't know if I mean that as a place necessarily, but you know, there's a certain commonality between ayahuasca, which is DMT orally activated, between psilocybin, which you can think of as a oral form of DMT. Basically, it's a tryptamine, and the simple tryptamines like DMT and 5-methoxy DMT, which are quite different if you take them without an MAO inhibitor, if you take them by smoking or so on. But you take a few of these things, you recognize there's a commonality of experience that I would characterize as the tryptamine dimension or the tryptamine character. But, you know, everybody's different, and I would not say that phenethylamines are not able to produce profound experiences.
Oh, wow.
So much depends on the individual, you know, and we're all, and the circumstances, and you know, we're all biochemically unique, you know.
Right.
That's one of the beauties of, I guess, being a biological entity. You know, your trip is not my trip, you know, and it never will be, and you should probably be happy about that.
Well, another question is that during your, I believe it was your La Carrera experience, which we didn't really talk about, but that's okay. We'll talk about so much. There'll be other episodes, but there was a sound that you felt would free us all. What do you think that sound sounds like? And I think he's talking about the ESR resonation, but what do you think about that?
I don't know what to think about it now. There was a sound that we could hear on high doses of mushrooms, an internal sound, and you can hear the same thing on DMT. There's a lot of internal auditory stuff. At La Chorrera, we speculated that this was the electron spin resonance of the tryptamines binding into these receptor sites, which we postulated was actually DNA in the neurons, in the postsynaptic neuron. That's all bunk, it turns out. That was a complete delusion. The sounds were real, but what they are, I have no idea. And I tend to not discuss the experiment at La Chorrera so much anymore, because I've been, you know, I've talked about it a lot. We did a retrospective on
the 50th anniversary.
Yeah, on the Academy, and I said, okay, enough of this.
You know, for sure, and it's all out there. Anybody can find
it's all out there. It's all out there. If people want to pursue it, they can.
Another question we have is: do you still think there are insect anthropologists studying the human race?
Insect anthropologists?
Yes, someone claimed you thought that at one point, that insect anthropologists were studying the human race from some outer dimension.
Who knows? Maybe not. I mean, yeah. Again, at La Chorrera, we had this, you know, this idea that the experiences we were having were, and a lot of what was being downloaded to us was coming, that the channels, the mushrooms were a channel for that, and that it was coming from some extraterrestrial or extra dimensional entity, which we visualized in our, we visualized as some kind of mantid type entity looking like a praying mantis, which you have to admit they look pretty darn weird.
Many people have seen that, including myself.
Many people see it.
Yes.
But then many people have read Terrence and Dennis McKenna. So what's their, how much are they influenced? I mean, I hope they're insect anthropologists studying it. But I have no idea.
Okay.
I really have no idea.
Do you still, Dennis, do you still consider The Invisible Landscape to be your magnum opus, or is it now Brotherhood of the Screaming Abyss, or even your psilocybin book that you published under the pseudonyms?
Well, I think the psilocybin book, in terms of its actual impact on society, is by far the most important thing that Terrence and I ever published, because there's nothing supernatural or theoretical about it. It was a very simple technique that anyone could do, and then they could grow mushrooms and have these experiences, and we were motivated in part, mostly actually, by the impulse to get this out there, to give people the tools to grow mushrooms so that they could confirm that these bizarre experiences we were having were just that, or not, so, and that's really what brought mushrooms and psychedelics in general to the wider world.
Because, definitely.
So I think in terms of its actual impact on human society, possibly even on evolution or whatever, definitely, the mushroom book was the most important. So
was it your will or the mushrooms' will that made you write that book, or is it both, a symbiotic relationship between
I think it's both. It really is. It was a symbiotic relationship. And once we knew how to do it, we wanted to share that information with people, and we did. So that had a big influence. The Invisible Landscape, I don't regard as our magnum opus necessarily, because knowing what we know now versus what we knew when we wrote it, I mean, honestly, a lot of it is bunk. I'm sorry, but a lot of it is
good for
bunk.
people to know that. Let's get that information out there. It's good for people to know that.
It's a very peculiar piece. I don't want to discourage people from reading it. I think it's just historically, it's very interesting. There's really nothing like it, so people should read it, but they should take it with a huge grain of salt, and just read it for the appreciation of nothing else, of how bloody deluded we were. I mean, you can read it from that perspective. And as far as the Brotherhood of the Screaming Abyss, I don't know if I can call it my my magnum opus, but it's just my story.
Yes,
it's just my story about my life and growing up with Terrence and this
it's an incredible
journey
book
that we shared for so long, and in some ways still share. I mean, Terrence is gone from the physical plane, but he's still very much in the conversation. He's achieved this odd kind of immortality. He's become this avatar on the web. And even though what he talked about was 20 years ago, or now more than that, he was most famous, most well known in the 90s. So we're talking 30 years ago.
Oh, he's still huge now. I mean,
he's still huge.
The McKenna family is huge.
Yeah. And so many people have told me, students and so on, who have told me, Terrence was such a profound influence. Everything I know, I learned from him, and so on. these people were in diapers when Terence was at the top of his game, you know. So it's had that historical impact, and that's great. You know,
well, it's had a huge impact. I don't want to discredit any of it. It's incredible. And I'm just wondering, have you ever heard Jerry Garcia's 60-second review of The Invisible Landscape?
I think I have, yeah.
Okay, because I was going to play it for you right now if you haven't heard it. Would you like to hear it?
Sure, I'd love to hear it. I have heard it, but I'm not sure what I don't remember what.
Let's hear what Jerry Garcia says. Here we go.
Okay.
What kind of stuff have you been into lately as far as
ideas?
Yeah,
just staying away.
Space.
Oh, there's a fantastic book called The Invisible Landscape that anybody who wants to have their brain turned inside out should read. It's by the McKenna brothers, who are Terence and Dennis McKenna, who are a pair of scientists, ethnobotanists, anthropologists, mathematicians,
physics standard, one of them.
And in the book, they propose a theory, like a holographic theory of mind in the universe. They talk about the mechanical and electromagnetic way that psychedelics affect the mind and the DNA and RNA specifically.
I believe it. The thing with RNA, the filtering mechanism.
Right. Then they talk about a time map, which is described by the I Ching as a calendrical system. The subtitle of the book is Mind Hallucinogens in the I Ching. And it's a fantastic book.
So there you go.
I remember. You know, the interesting thing is, is that actually Jerry understood the invisible landscape, you know, as much as it was, you know, bunk and this wild speculation and so on, but he got it. I mean, he was actually, I think Jerry, I don't think people understood. This guy was a profound intellectual.
Oh, he was a genius in many ways.
Yeah, and he read it and he got it, you know. And
how does it feel to affect people like that, who then affected millions of people? Of course, your information and Terence's information affected probably hundreds of millions, maybe a billion people or more. But so has Jerry Garcia's music. He was the soundtrack of that experience.
Absolutely.
And how does it feel as just like a person, a human, to have this information that affects so many people? What does that feel like?
Well, you know, I don't think about it too much. I mean, you know, I don't think of myself in that way. You know, I may have had the influence. I don't think Jerry Garcia went around telling himself, you know, you're a cultural influence on billions of people. I don't think he bothered. He just did what he was doing. He was doing his creative thing, and I'm kind of the same way. And you know, when it comes down to it, Jake, I'm just another curious monkey that's trying to figure this thing out. You know, I don't have any inside track on the truth at all. And I'm, you know, I don't pretend to. I don't have any secret, or you know what I'm saying. I'm just, I'm just.
You were just a psychonaut, just like everyone else.
But thinking about it and trying to figure out what it was made me about, which is what all that any of us can do at any time is, you know, and that's our life's quest, you know. I mean, curiosity. I've always had curiosity, and that's a good trait, I think. I mean, curiosity is what drives science. It's what drives discovery and so on, and that's mainly what we are. If we were not curious, if we weren't curious monkeys, we would never have gotten anywhere, you know. And maybe the earth would have been better off if we hadn't been, but that's not the way it's turned out. So here we are, you know?
Well, humans, if you kind of look at humans as kind of, I don't want to, it's a kind of a terrible metaphor, but like a stock or something, like, you know, our value's going up. We're doing good, and the best of us are incredible. The best of humanity are absolutely incredible manifestors with incredible psychic gifts. Like, the best of humanity is incredible. And then, of course, the worst of us is the most abominous shit you can possibly imagine. But but because that best of us exists, it kind of proves that we can make it. There is a frequency of love, an energy behind all that is propelling us forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's a two-edged sword. Exactly. I mean, there are really terrible people in the world, really brilliant people who are trying to advance things, and most of us are somewhere in between that. I mean, I sometimes say we're halfway on our evolutionary journey from apes to angels. We're about halfway there.
Wow.
We're about halfway there. We haven't reached it yet, but we're keep trying.
I made the same joke. Instead of angels, I said Star Trek. I said we're halfway between caveman and Star Trek, but angels is a way better thing to aspire to, I think.
Yeah, apart from all the religious connotations, but angels to me implies, a super advanced human state in a certain way. And we're getting there. We have to have faith that we're evolving in that way. And the whole thing is, can we keep it together until we reach that point? Because right now, the whole enterprise is in danger of collapsing and falling apart. But I don't know, Jake. I think I'm going to have to stop because I'm losing my voice here.
Oh no! I wanted to tell people really quick that I'm so sorry this is happening, but I want to tell people really quick about where to find you. Of course, you can go to mckenna.academy, and that is where you can find the McKenna Academy of Natural Philosophy. We talked about how it's a modern mystery school. It's the culmination of Dennis's knowledge. He's coalescing that in a virtual form and putting it out there for people with other humans. Of course, they're contributing their energy to get this academy off the ground. And I really appreciate you being with us, Dennis. I'm sorry your voice is failing, but there's so much for us to talk about. Hopefully we can do
more to talk about. I do want to put a shout out to the wonderful people I get to work with on the McKenna Academy. It's not about me. It's about this collective group of really brilliant, creative people, and it's a pleasure to work with them. I should mention, shameless self-promotion here, but we are a nonprofit. We can accept donations that are tax deductible, and we're in the middle of a fundraising campaign. So if people feel moved to donate and support our work, we appreciate that. And actually, if you go to the website, the first thing you're going to get slapped in the face with is, a page to donate, which you can just dismiss. I kind of don't like it. I don't like it that that's the first thing you see. But we do need support.
Yes.
And if you get past that, there's a lot of good stuff on that website. Past events, resources, my blog, which people like. Just a bunch of things, and they can sign up. They can sign up for our newsletter, and that's the sort of thing to keep in the loop about upcoming events. And we've got a number of things happening in addition. I mentioned the ethnobotany course.
Yes, I was going to say there's a special right now on the ethnobotany course, which closes on September 15th. This episode is going to be debut September 9th, so there is time to get in on this. It
closes on the 13th, Jake.
Yes.
13th.
The 13th. Uh-oh.
Yeah.
So this closes on the 13th.
Later this year, we have a symposium planned on the stone ape theory, which we're going to probably October, November sometime. And then if you look at the website, we've got some other projects going on. We've got a documentary project in Peru that's going to be pretty interesting. We're just starting filming on that. So that's going to be, so we're just trying to, fulfill our mission. And a lot of our mission is education. As any good academy should do education. So that's what we're shooting for.
Dennis, I really appreciate you being on the show. Thank you so much. We have to have you back on. I feel like a person like me and you, we could talk for hours and hours and hours, but at the very least, we got to have you back on at some time in the next 6 months or year or so we can talk again about all these fantastic things. And of course, he has books that you can check out: The Brotherhood of the Screaming Abyss, the psilocybin book, which is still in print. The Invisible Landscape is still available.
Still in print. Yep.
Yeah, so you can go check out these books. Dennis, thank you so much for being here. Everyone, we'll see you next week. This is just such a heady conversation. It's mind-blowing. It's outside of time and space. We'll see you next week. Midnight.
Okay, Jake. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Dennis.
Real pleasure. I look forward to circling back. We'll revisit this in a year or so and see where we're at.
Yes, just hold on just 1 second through the outro music, and we'll see you next week, everyone.
Okay.